13 and a half hours ago is when all holy heck broke loose around that in Cleveland, Ohio.
12 and a half.
Somewhat. And the NFL has responded. We will not be seeing Myles Garrett until 2020 on a football field. That the NFL has suspended him indefinitely without pay, at minimum for the remainder of the regular season and postseason. And I think that's generous of the NFL to include the word postseason in regards to Myles Garrett and Cleveland, despite their 2-game winning streak for the first time this season. And the person in question, Myles Garrett, must now meet with the commissioner's office prior to a decision on his reinstatement. Also fined an additional amount. Garrett violated unnecessary roughness and unsportsmanlike conduct rules, as well as fighting, removing the helmet of an opponent, and using the helmet as a weapon. I think that pretty much covers it. And that essentially that's NFL official language of he lost his friggin' mind. Also, Larry Ogunjobi has been suspended for a game from the Cleveland Browns. He's been fined an additional amount for unnecessary roughness, specifically for shoving an opposing player to the ground during an altercation. Larry's the one who came in after Myles Garrett swung Mason Rudolph's helmet at him. The most, I would think, famous use of somebody's own item as a weapon against them since Richard Kimball used a gun in the direction of Tommy Lee Jones, right?
I don't care.
You were pointing my gun at me, I remember. Ogunjobi's the one who then shoved Mason Rudolph to the ground after all of that.
That's ridiculous.
And lip readers could see a B word emerging from Mason's mouth. Now, Maurkice Pouncey's been suspended, too, as the Steelers also got popped $250,000 as an organization. Same thing with the Browns. Maurkice Pouncey's been suspended without pay for 3 games and fined an additional amount for fighting, including punching and kicking an opponent. To me, I think Ogunjobi and Pouncey's suspensions should be reversed. Pouncey, the only reason why he reacted that way is he watched Myles Garrett rip the helmet off his quarterback's head and swing it at his helmetless head. And I would proffer to say, this is a tough one for the Steelers, man, because they lost the game last night. They're 5-5 now. And they're without their Pro Bowl-worthy center now for 3 games because Myles Garrett couldn't control himself and went totally ham and haywire. I'm wondering if he can get that knocked down a little bit by suspension. I understand the NFL does not want to see somebody swinging their foot at somebody on the ground like, and I tweeted this out, like De Niro in Goodfellas, just constantly swinging a leg at somebody who's prone on the floor. I understand that's a terrible look, and as a matter of fact, that was the first look we saw from the Fox cameras because this game was over. There's 5 seconds to go, and the cameras were trained on the play down the field. Meanwhile, back there's some sort of craziness that's happening back near the goal line and in the end zone, and the scrum spills into the end zone, and all we see is Pouncey kicking at somebody. That was the first thing we saw. And then the cameras reveal Myles Garrett pulling what I've never seen on a football field. I know Kyle Turley threw his helmet in 2001. I was on SportsCenter, and we treated him like he was public enemy number 1 for several weeks after that. Lyle Alzado swung a helmet in the 70s. Fine. I have never seen what Myles Garrett did on a football field last night, and it damages him. It damages his team. It damages the sport. I'm glad it happened so late at night that kids on the East Coast were asleep. I'm glad my kids didn't see this either. And I understand that people who know Myles Garrett, certainly better than I do, will defend him as a human being who's of quality demeanor. But when push came to shove last night, the one thing I can describe Myles Garrett as, and there's a lot of adjectives that's being used to describe him and his actions last night, the one thing Myles Garrett is more than anything else is lucky. Because when he swung Mason Rudolph's helmet at Rudolph, the helmet, the bottom part of it, where there is some padding on the inside, was what connected with Rudolph. If he had somehow twisted the helmet off and it had flipped over in his hand, and when he swung the helmet at Rudolph, if it was the crown of the helmet, he could have killed Mason Rudolph. Literally, the quarterback of the Steelers could have been dead on the turf last night, and that is not at all an exaggeration or trying to over-dramatize this. He is lucky. We are going to be talking about this the rest of Myles Garrett's career. He not only cost himself and his team last night, he cost himself the Defensive Player of the Year award that he was in line to potentially win. He was in the conversation. That's out. History. The Browns' playoff chances without a Defensive Player of the Year caliber guy up front, you've got to think major hit. But the one thing out of everything that Garrett is lucky, because if he had connected Rudolph with his own helmet with that rate of speed via the crown of the helmet, Rudolph might be hospitalized, even worse, dead. And just ask Kermit Washington how long the punch he delivered to Rudy Tomjanovich that broke Tomjanovich's face, how long that lasted with him. Rest of his life. Rest of his life. Did he intend to break Rudy Tomjanovich's face in 15 million different pieces when he swung the punch? But the result wound up rearranging Rudy T's face back in 1977. Rest of his life. You can go down the road here. I believe he lives in the South Bay. Famed hockey player Marty McSorley got into a fight in 2000 with Donald Brashear. Later on, with mere seconds left in the game, retaliated by swinging the stick to his head. Did he intend for him to hit the ice and have a seizure on the spot? Of course not. Is that what happened? Yes, it did, because the helmet, due to the stick hitting him in the head, came off, came loose, and Brashear hit the ice without a helmet on. Boom, the bottom of his head hit it. And guess what? McSorley was actually charged with a crime and was found guilty of it, served an 18-month probation period. The NHL suspended him for a year. He never played another game in the NHL. Ask Marty McSorley how long that stuck with him. Rest of his life. Myles Garrett is lucky that all we're talking about today is a suspension for the rest of the year and a visit to the commissioner's office before he gets reinstated, because, you know, week one, he hit Delaney Walker after the whistle in Tennessee. Week two, he snapped Trevor Simeon's ankle. In two, we were all talking at the time, was it dirty? Was it not? Did he intend to do it? Now guess what? You're a dirty player now, Myles. Rest of your career, you're a dirty player. Everybody's going to be talking about it. It's a shame.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download the Rich Eisen Show app.